And I just wanted to talk for a minute about CCIJ, the Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism. At CCIJ, we bring together visual, data, and investigative journalists as equal partners to carry out ongoing projects on key global issues. We have a commitment to working with journalists who would not otherwise have an opportunity to participate in global projects. And also we have a commitment to working with and learning from individuals, families, and organizations in underserved communities, as well as a staunch and deep commitment to training. And that brings us to today's session. I'm thrilled that Etinosa Yvonne, who is on assignment in Mozambique, is joining us today to talk about her work during our session about self-directed passion projects, the vital elements for success, satisfaction, and impact. So the way this will go is that we will now turn to our creative director, Scott Lewis, who does many different areas, works in many different areas at CCIJ, is a tremendous member of our core team. Scott will then introduce Etinosa. Etinosa will talk and show some work, and then there'll be some opportunity for dialogue. So if you have any questions or comments during the time, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will go till an hour, so about 55 minutes. And so shortly before that, Esther will put some links in around an evaluation, just a very brief evaluation that we ask folks to fill out so that we can get the feedback, improve, and also get resources to continue to provide these opportunities. So thank you so much for being here. I will now turn it over to Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm really excited to have Etinosa here. I've been watching her work for a year or two now and haven't had a chance to work with her yet as on assignment, but wanted to give the platform to a photographer who is emerging in their career and doing great work. Etinosa is just back from the Berlin Biennial recently and has been working on some really compelling, creative, personal projects that I wanted to give a chance to show the value of that as it plays into the other aspects of being a professional photographer. And for those of you who think it's just about pictures, I can tell you that it related to this presentation in particular, having a plan B for when things don't always go your way, just in case, is as important as the quality of the work at times that you do. We didn't need our plan B, but we had one just in case. And so just as a reminder of that, for everyone out there looking at this, thinking about photography, it is, yes, about photography, but it is also about your professionalism that you bring to the table and how under control you are with that. So with that, I will hand it over to Etinosa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Scott. Very lovely to be here. And hello from this side. It's currently 8:07 here. So good evening from my side. I assume that, we're in different time zones, so it will be different times. But hello to everyone. Very happy to be here. I tend to talk a lot, so I'm going to have to remind myself that I have roughly about, I think maybe 40 minutes, I guess, to speak so that I don't go out of tune. I might not leave my video on because of the internet here. I do not want it to break. It's not so great. So I'm going to turn off my video and just talk. And sometimes I'll turn it on so that you can see that I'm here. All right. So I'm going to be talking about personal projects as a vital tool for self-development. I'll just talk briefly about myself. 2017 was when I started photography. First off, can everybody hear me? Please just let me know so that I'm sure that, can you all hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear me, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I was saying that I started photography in 2017. And I'll just mention a bit of my background because that has sort of helped me. I used to be a social media marketer, but the point is that my 9-to-5 life has sort of helped me in my photography background, my photography career. And in 2017, I resigned from my job and I said, I want to start something, I want to do something, I want to add value to my society. And I just knew that I needed to find a way that I could be of value to my society. So I decided I was going to learn about photography. And I started to watch videos on YouTube and, read articles and just educate myself about photography. And in 2018, I went for my first photography workshop. And that was the first time I would hear somebody speak so different about photography and how powerful it is and how important it is. And it was after the workshop that I decided, okay, I'm really going to take this serious and I'm going to start a personal project. And I'm happy I went for that workshop because at the time I really didn't know what personal projects was about. I'd been researching and reading things, but I didn't understand what I could use, how I could harness, leverage on the power of personal projects. So in 2018, I started this project. This is an image of Hajara Abubakar from my project Is All in My Head. It's a project I started in 2018. It explores the coping mechanisms of survivors of terrorism and instances of conflict and cruelty in Nigeria and how that impacts their mental health. And I use the project to advocate for increased access to psychosocial support for survivors. I would say that when I started this project in 2018, my focus at the time was basically people who had survived the Boko Haram insurgency. But as I continued to work on the project, I decided to expand the scope of the project. And this is one of the many benefits of working on personal project, because I started it with the focus on one thing, but the more that I'll go back to the field and have discussions with these people, then I realized there was a need to expand it further from the initial plan that I had. Now, when I started this project, I didn't know anything about arts I just knew that I needed to figure out a way, because before then I used to go to some of these camps for displaced people in Abuja, people who have been displaced by the Boko Haram insurgency. And one of the things that I had discussions, I'll tell you a particular discussion that I'll never forget. I met a man who used to be in Nigeria, I would say a big man. A big man is someone who is wealthy, who can take care of his family, who is really very comfortable. And this man is what we'll call a big man by Nigerian standards. But when I met him, he was living in this really small 2-bedroom uncompleted building with 14 family members. And he started to tell me about what his life was before. He was a farmer. He had all of this harvest that he had planned to sell at the right season. And then all of a sudden, insurgents came and he had to run away and not take anything with him. Unfortunately, because especially for people in rural areas, they sort of store up their wealth, not in banks, but in terms of they store it up as harvest. So instead of putting my money in a bank, I'd rather have 100 bags of granite, which is money, because when you sell it, then they get money from it. So when he ran away to preserve his life, he suffered a devastating loss, because it means that every form of wealth he had to leave behind. And I think it was that man's story that really made me realize that what happens when these people, we all see them. If you look at for people, let's use the wider context, or maybe people in refugee camps, what we are mostly focused on is just how they are rebuilding their lives. But when you sit with some of these people and see how life was before and how they have to start to rebuild again, it's really devastating. And then I started to wonder, how does that impact their mental health? And this is how I started this project. And before I started it, once I attended the movie screening, that's where I got the idea for the project. I knew that I didn't just want to, because I thought of, when I started learning about photography, I was seeing more documentary approach to projects, but I knew that with what I want to show, there was no way that I was going to probably just go and take portraits of these people or photograph them, their everyday life, to show the impact it has on their mental health. I knew that I wanted the viewers or the audience to be able to get into the state of mind of these people that I was talking to. And so with a bit more research back on YouTube, I saw something about double exposure and I was like, wow, this is interesting. And that was how I decided I was going to use this for my project. And I started to, work around with double exposures. And since 2018, I have been working with double exposures for this project. One of the things that I would say is that when I started the project, at the time, I wasn't quite sure. When I started the project, I think I knew what I was trying to achieve, but to an extent, I didn't really know. But as I continued to stay on the project, things became clearer and clearer. I think that I didn't include it, but I wanted to also show how initially, when I started this project, I would, when it was first published, it was published with, NPR was the first platform that published this work, because I'd gotten a grant from Women Photograph. And so somehow the editor, who was one of the judges, assigned somebody to interview me to speak about this work. And I remember what they did was to have little captions about the people's stories. But I think at the time I was like, nah, I don't want these people's, as I continued to work on the project now with all the stories I was hearing, I knew that I didn't want people to just read their stories. I didn't want to reduce their experiences to captions. So it was a year after I began the project that I remember I was on assignment in a state in Nigeria, and I was like, how best can I show these people, even if it's not all of the things they have told me, but how can I show at least an excerpt, something that can really give people an insight into what they have been through. And that was how I came up with the idea of, placing their text on the same fabric that I use to photograph them. And then also in 2018, as I continued to work on the project, because the project is heavily reliant on emotions, it became very difficult, extremely difficult to show those emotions with just layers of images. So while traveling to research for the work, I got an idea, why don't I try double exposure videos? I'd never seen it before, but I just heard the voice say double exposure videos, and I went online, I checked, I was like, oh, for real, there's something like that. And this was how So this is how I started to incorporate motion into the project. I'm talking through the project because I have some points that I want to now highlight, and I'll come back to this project. I don't know, can everyone still hear me? I just want to be sure I've not been lost. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to talk about the benefits of personal projects based on things that I would say that have worked for me in my very few years working as a documentary photographer. I would say number one is that it gives room for growth. If you listen to some of the things I said, when I started this project, I started initially with, I want to focus on one thing. I was going to focus on survivors of terrorism. And then I continued researching and I said, nope, Nigeria has too many layers of conflict to just focus on one thing, because there are different people going through these different atrocities. And we seem to have a mental health crisis that nobody is paying attention to, especially because one of the things I found that because this type of things happen to an extent, a certain class of people. So these intellectuals, these people in urban spaces, they don't really pay attention. Conversations around mental health don't really come down to people, especially like people who have been through terrorism. To an extent, a lot of terrorist activities have happened it had happened in Nigeria, let me use Nigeria as an example, not in like the major cities. They have happened in like rural, not rural, but in some towns that are not really where like the government house is and all of that. So the way that they would, the attention that is given to them is basically on their physical needs. We give them a makeshift room and put maybe one health facility and some wash services, and that's okay. But this conversation around how how does this impact them? You know, for someone who has been through, you know, who was up there before and has come and has you know, or maybe somebody who, for example, Deborah, whose husband was killed by headsmen and she's now left to cater for 7 kids. How does that impact their mental health? So for me, I would say that because I stayed on this project, it has been able to help me think of how best to show the work, and especially as it relates to my country, as it relates to my society, it has allowed me to say, okay, let me try out this way, let me try out this way. And I'd say that's one of the many benefits of personal projects. If I compare some of my personal projects to like assignments, in fact, I'd say, yes, I do assignments, but the way that I've seen myself grow in the last few years is really because, especially for my project, like it's all in my head. I've been working on it since 2018, and I've seen that the way I'm approaching it, it changes on a yearly basis. Like as of last year, I started thinking of how I can incorporate another layer, 3D layer. How can I bring these people into a physical space? Not even if they will not be there, but how can I bring their presence into a physical space? I've been able to explore different approaches with this project in the last few years. Then I would say it helped develop your visual style language. I remember when I started photography, there was an editor. She asked me, what is your visual style? I was like, what is my visual style? I don't know. It was funny. I'd never heard that question. Can you hear me? Sorry, I don't know what happened. It just logged me out.
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you now. That's all right.
Okay. I'm going to, I need to share my screen again. Okay, I don't see the thing to share screen. Okay, I've seen it now. Okay, can you see the screen?
It says it's starting, so maybe just a second. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for that. Okay, so I was saying how an editor asked me, I remember that was, I think it was my first assignment with them. And she said, you know, what is your visual style? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just, of course, I was just wanting to, that was my first editorial assignment. I didn't even have an idea of, you know, what it is I was still trying to figure out myself and what it is I want out of my career. But I think that in the last few years, I've seen, in terms, it's still linked to growth anyway, I've seen the way that I've been able to develop a style for myself, whether visually or even, I didn't point out ethics here, but also in terms of the visual. Although I'm not limiting myself, I'm allowing myself to explore, because the reason that she asked me that question was that she said to me that older photographers, as they carry on in their practice, they sort of have a visual style. But what I find sometimes from my understanding of visual language is when you develop it, there's a tendency to get comfortable using certain styles. And when I say style, it could be an approach to the way that you document things or your personal projects, but it could be very limiting. I would say that for me, I'm still exploring different things. I don't know if I found my style yet, but I'm on each project that I work on, I try to push myself out of my comfort zone. I try to try out new approaches. I don't want to be stuck with what it is I know and just stay stagnant. Then I'll say, it lets you find yourself. It lets you find yourself. Ooh, this year I was at the place where I was really exhausted mentally, especially with traveling. I'd been traveling for months. I was working on an assignment and I was traveling, and you know how this job can be extremely lonely, and I was really just mentally exhausted. But I think it was a senior colleague I met that, you know, spoke to me, and that sort of made me remember why I started photography in the first place. I would say that from the time I started photography to now, it has really changed me and my perception of the world. and a lot of things, although I'm still learning and unlearning, but I know there's still a lot of room for good for me, but photography has really changed me. I would say that mistakes are allowed. I'm going to point out mistakes are allowed in the next slide that I have under, and then I'll come back to that. Then it allows clients to trust your vision. I also have some pointers that I'll talk about with examples here. So now I'm going to talk to you briefly about the second project I started in 2019. This image you see here was taken in 2019, in June 2019, in a state called Kaduna. When I started It's All in My Head, it became so heavy for me. It was, because you're dealing with heavy subject matter, I noticed that I started to lose myself because you're hearing so many heavy stories and you're collecting so much pain. And I knew that I needed to find a balance in terms of the projects that I was working on. So one of my a senior colleague has always said that his environment is what inspires him. So I started to sort of think in that direction of what inspires me. And I remember I'd just come back from the New York Times portfolio review, which was in 2019. I was in Lagos. I think that was in March or something, or April. I can't remember at the time I came back. And I started to notice how there was a lot of guys who would, wear pink lip balm, and then they would, they were paying attention to their looks and their grooming culture. And I said, why don't I explore this? This is a different project for me. And so in 2019, when I was in Kaduna, I was actually researching for working on my project Is All in My Head. But I told the family I was staying with that this is a project I would like to work on. Do you know any guy who sort of pays attention to their looks, etc., etc. And then my friend of blessed memory introduced me to Mama. And so I went to Mama's house and I said to him that I'm working on a project. I want to understand the grooming culture of men. In fact, I'm going to be honest, as of 2019, when I started this project, I didn't have clarity on how I wanted to approach it. I didn't even understand what it is that I wanted to achieve, but I knew that I had an idea, and I just said, okay, I want to understand the grooming culture of men. I want to know your favorite body parts, but it wasn't all that clear. So I went to his house. He let me into his house. I photographed him. One of the points of the project was also to look at the body parts of men. Like for me, growing up in Nigeria, one of the things that I've been used to seeing on the media, whether Western media or Nigerian media, is the objectification of women's bodies. Like women's bodies are always highlighted. So it's almost as if we have been made to believe that men don't like to pay attention to themselves. So with this project, I wanted to find out if that was really true. And so I also told him that, what is your favorite body part? Are you okay with me photographing your favorite body part? And he said yes. And then I continued working on the project. But I noticed, first of all, I'm working with different guys. I have to go to their houses. In terms of the visual language, I felt it was flat. I felt it was a bit boring. I didn't like the fact that there was no harmony. The first two images I showed you were like the finest images from when I started it in 2019. But as I continued it, some people's houses were just a bit chaotic, and I couldn't really capture anything. The images would be flat. And so in 2020, I stayed with myself and I said, you know what, I'm going to restart this project. I met somebody who kept saying, I want to be a part of your project, but I need to come to your studio. And then I had to face my fear, because for me, starting documentary photography meant that I'm only photographing outside. I don't use lights, especially as you're self-taught. I wasn't exposed to using like strobes and all of that. So that was a big fear for me. But I said, you know what, let me give it a try. And so in 2020, I think it was September, I went to a studio, found a studio, told it was a photographer. I said, this is the project I'm working on. I would like to try out. I need you to help me, show me how to use light, assist me if possible. And then this is what I can offer you for a fee to use your studio. And that was how I went back to the studio and we started the project in a studio setting. It's actually a multimedia project. When I started it in 2019, I didn't think about the video. Unfortunately, I forgot to include the video in the slide. But it's a multimedia project where I'm talking to men, I'm asking them questions about, the societal standards of how men should portray themselves. I'm asking them questions about their favorite body parts. I also ask the men to perform. So for example, if I had included it, there is a video of, oh shit. Sorry, I need to get this to go. Okay, there is the video of Mama performing, but I forgot to include that in the slide. Sorry about that. And then I kept on, working on the project. So now going back to the point of number 8, where I said mistakes are allowed. I wouldn't call what I started with a mistake, but I would say that starting it, doing it, realizing that the visions are not coming together, then going back to it in 2020, for me, this is something that will only have happened because I was working on my personal project. I don't think any client will give you the opportunity to, they will say, go out to the field, and then you start, you don't do it right. Then they say, 1 year later, come back, let's try it again. Maybe it has happened before, I've never heard of it, but with personal projects, you can see how you can take your time, start it, it doesn't work well, you keep it, then you come back to it, and then it works. And for me, that's exactly what has happened so far, in the way that, for my projects, I've noticed that sometimes just taking time off it, even like it's all in my head, just by doing it, staying away from it, coming back to it, I continue to have different ideas, different approach to the way that I'm working on the project. Because of time constraints, I didn't want to include so many aspects. The project has evolved far beyond just images and even the cinemagraphs like we have here. For example, last year, I had my solo exhibition in Lagos, and I was able to push myself in terms of even the way the show, the project was shown. And also, that was my first time having an installation of the project, not just hanging it on the wall. I was able to incorporate video into the work, which was something different. It was immersive. We had people with headsets. It was a different way of showing, something I never imagined, but that's only because I'd stayed on the project. And the more that I stay and come back to it, the more I found ways to refine it, because the object or the objective of the project is, the more important thing is to get people to connect with these stories, not just to be entertained or to find the best way, but really to get people to be in the state of mind of these people that we're showing. So I'll say that with personal projects, you can make mistakes, you can learn from your mistakes, and you can grow through those mistakes. And now I also mentioned it allows clients to trust your vision. So the client I'm working in 2021, I worked with this client called WaterAid. And before we would go for where we would have the commission, we had a plan, we talked. I had this very ugly sketch that I put together. Pardon me, it's really ugly, I know. But based on the brief they gave me, I had this idea, very fanciful. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it like this. I sort of showed them this very ugly sketch, and they were like, yeah, it sounds good. And then I went to the field where we would do the work. And based on the brief, I found out that what was on ground was different from the assumptions we had. And on the spot, I had to think, because I was going to be there for like 6-7 days. This is why I like assignments that, allow you to stay on the field for up to a week, so you can think things through. But it doesn't happen every time. Sometimes you only have 1 hour to think things through. And so we go to the field, and I found out that, okay, so the idea was, they had told me that this place, they don't really have water and all of that. And I was like, okay, I'll probably do like a picture series where showing how the people who collect water, the assumption is that it's women who are collecting water. So I'm going to show how people collect water, how they store it. And I sort of had this idea, and I scribbled something, and they were like, okay, this sounds great. Then I went to the community, and then after much talk, I found out that it's not even the women who fetch water. It's actually the men. And then I actually tried to place the women with the containers, and visually it was so ugly and so terrible. The light was spilling, everything was just not coming together. And I remember I went back to the hotel, and I was like, oh, I need to figure something out, like now. I remember there was the men who would fetch water. And then going back to my project, I was like, why don't I do a diptych just like my project? Why don't I photograph the men and then photograph the things that represent the water that they collect? And that was it. I went back the next day, and we made an announcement in the community to say, if you're a man and you fetch water for your family, because we know it's mostly men who fetch water here, if you would like to be a part of this project, this is how, this is what I would do. I definitely will bring prints for you. this is how your image will be used. And a lot of people were like, oh yeah, I would like to be a part of it. So we arranged the particular day when I'll go back for that, to photograph the men. And that's how I came up with this idea. And I told my editor that I was working on, I said, things did not go as planned. I've changed my plan. And she was like, that's okay. And then by the time I sent her the images, because the diptychs are something I do for my other projects, so it doesn't take me time to put it together. She was very excited, So I would say that with personal project, what I found, and I'm using this as an example, but I've had clients reach out to me, and it doesn't happen for all clients. Some clients are more like strict with what they want visually. They say, I want you to photograph like this, like this, like this. But I found that a lot of times, some clients would make reference to my project to say, we like your work. We saw this particular project. We would like you to do something like this. I actually forgot to mention, in 2019, I had a collaboration with UNFPA, that's the United Nations Sexual Reproductive Health Agency, where we worked together for my project. Is all in my head. They said, okay, they wanted to do this story and we would like you to, since you're already working on something with mental health, we'd like to key into your project to work on this aspect. And that has now become a part of my own project. And so to an extent, depending on how you approach your personal projects, it gets to the point where clients start to trust you with your vision. And although, like I said, it doesn't happen for every client, but you will get some clients who will say, we want to key into your own vision, or we trust that you will deliver this work to us based off what you were saying that you can do. I put this example here. This is from one of my projects that I did during COVID. I would come back to this image because there's something I wrote in the next slide I'm going to, in the second to the next slide I'm going to, and I will come back to this picture and talk about it. But when I was in that place, the picture on the right is inspired by this one. So when I was trying to think things through regarding how to photograph things that represent the way they collect water, I remember that I'd done something similar like this, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do something like this. So basically, I wanted to use this to illustrate how working on your personal projects, it's somehow you see that as you continue to act, when I look at the works of some of my senior colleagues, because whenever I have opportunity process and then I go on their site, I study their works, I see that there's some sort of visual harmony in their work, even works they have been doing for 10, 15 years. You can see that there's similarities, whether in the theme or in the presentation, or in the way that, the visual style of the work, as you just, and that's the thing about personal projects, it just allows you, as you continue to practice, you continue to churn out work, you find that your work, they don't look so similar, but there's also a way that you find that you can actually put together things in a way that they all come together. And when you look at your work, I remember talking to a senior colleague, and from the work he has been doing over the years, he plans to create a book. And these are all works that he did separately, but now that he's looking at them together, he's seeing how they're all connected somehow. So he wants to create a book around that. Now I come to sustaining your projects. I'll say number one of the things that has worked for me, when I started, it's all in my head. I didn't have a website. I remember I went for a workshop and I showed the work, and one of my senior colleagues said, where is this project? I said, it's on my laptop. He's like, why is it on your laptop? Get a website. And then I showed another senior colleague. When I finally got a website, I didn't have money. I found money and put together a website. He said, why don't you apply for a grant? And that's how I started. That's how I applied for a grant and got my first grant. So I'll say, when you have personal projects, because I don't know how it works, but I have talked to people who have very interesting work, but it's just on their laptop, it's just on their computer, or, they don't promote the work anywhere. It's just there. It's sort of like them and the few people they know that know about the work. And I think that social media has been very helpful for me. It's been very instrumental to my growth. And I cannot read it out, even if I don't use it as much these days, but it's really helped me. I would say when you start your projects, you want to publish and promote your work, publish on your site, if you're the type who pitches, you can pitch it to. When this project came out, I got someone from, after it was published on Petapix, I posted the picture from this project on my Instagram, and I got someone from Nigeria say, "Oh, has this work been published elsewhere?" And once I said, "Oh yes, it's been published," like, okay. They wanted sort of like exclusive. They wanted to be the first to publish, but it didn't work out that way because it had been published elsewhere. But I would say that if you're the type who is into pitching, you can pitch for your personal work to be, you can pitch to different platforms, whether it's Reuters, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's, you just find the right editor to speak to and say, this is my work, give a synopsis of the work and ask if they're interested in publishing it. For me, what I currently do is when I have a new body of work, I post just one image of it on Instagram, just one image on Instagram, and I tell people to go on my website and say the link is in my bio. That's what I do. I don't put like all my images from my work on my Instagram. I feel like Instagram, I know they say it's a portfolio, but I don't want to put too much out there. Promote your work. You're the one who did the work. It's only who can actually talk about the work. I also talked about applying for grants, residencies, exhibition. These are things that have been instrumental to my growth. My first grant from Women Photograph got me my first publication from NPR. That also got me my different publications. I started to get published more and more and more. People reach out to me. And actually, that was my first time. At the time, I didn't know people get paid when your work is published. They would say, "Oh, we want to publish your work." They would interview me and actually pay me. Just I started to grow in the practice. I realized it was some of the norms from the practice. Apply for residencies with your work, with your personal work. You can actually. I applied for an opportunity in 2019. The opportunity came with a solo exhibition, funding for a solo exhibition, a residency, and mentorship. And that helped me to go for a residency last year in London, which is really helpful for me to see things outside of what I know, to be able to think through things. Some of the things I've been doing where I felt like, oh, what am I doing? I went and I saw how there's so much, there's even so much work to do. Applying for exhibitions. I have applied for exhibitions. I used to apply for a lot of exhibitions. I think I only slow down now because I'm trying to find new ways to show my work, and I'm being more intentional in the way that I want my work to be shown. So I'm a bit like slowing down. But another thing is that I actually now get approached to be shown in exhibitions. So these are the ways that have helped me to actually get myself and my name out there. Attend portfolio reviews. I did attend in 2018 in New York, in 2019, or find people who can give you valuable feedback for on your work. The reason I added this other point is that portfolio reviews help me a lot. If you see my work in 2018, 2019, especially the video element of it's all in my head, the first set of edits I did, it was somebody during I think it was the Blink portfolio review of New York Times. I can't remember one. She saw the work and she said, this is nice, but you need to work. The technical aspect needs to be a bit neater. And I took that feedback. I came back to Nigeria. I spent time refining the edit, and it came out well. So portfolio reviews can be helpful, although they can be overwhelming. I think I haven't done any in years because it gets to a point, and this, I don't know, I also talked to other colleagues who sometimes go for portfolio reviews, and some of the things you hear can actually make you not want to go to work on your project again, especially when you are reviewed by people from the academia. They can be so brutal. They make you not want to look at your projects again. But I would say that portfolio reviews are also helpful. Or you can find people who you trust, who you admire, who you respect, and you don't have to know them, because let me be honest, the way that I use my social media has been a lot for although I'm coming to networking. There are times I start a new project and I reach out to someone whose work I respect and I follow on Instagram, and I say, "Hello, how are you doing? My name is this and that. I have a new project. I would like your feedback when you have time." And that is how I've been able to get feedback on my work, and also build connections just by that. So it doesn't really need to be people you know. Because what I find is that sometimes people you know can give you advice based on their knowledge of you. They want to be a bit gentle, they want to be, but sometimes when you even reach out to a neutral person, they can really, they will be respectable, but also tell you things that can help improve your work. But you need to be careful because 2020, when I did this project, I shared it with somebody whom I genuinely admire, and her feedback was devastating. It wasn't even feedback. She just told me outrightly that the project made no sense. And that was really, it was very hurtful. It was, it made me not like the project. It was this year I was talking to a senior colleague, and he reached out to me, wanted to review my portfolio, my works, and he told you this was the first work he referenced, that I'm interested in this project. Tell me about this project. But it was shocking because just a few years ago, someone had told me that this work made no sense. Even if I knew, even if she called later to apologize, but it was still devastating. So in terms of finding people to give you feedback, you need to be careful because, I don't know, not everybody is emotionally intelligent. Some feedback can be extremely hurtful, and that can just break you and also spoil your relationship with your work. So you want to be discerning and know who is your energy going with, who can I reach to for advice on my work. Build your network, find a mentor. 2 days ago, when I was thinking about this talk, I said I must mention mentorship because it has helped me so much, and it would be unfair for me not to talk about it. When I say mentorship, I don't mean like people that I pay or you're my mentor, or I'm in a formal mentorship. I've been in formal mentorship programs that have helped me, like the connections I got from there have helped me to get collaborations and opportunities. But I've also reached out to senior colleagues whom I genuinely admire. I don't say to them, be my mentor, but I just reach out and I stay in touch and I continue to reach out. And before you know it, I started to build that relationship. And every time I have a need, not every time, but so that I don't become a burden, but when I have specific needs, I need to understand, maybe negotiating, pricing my work, how do I make use of this kind of opportunities? They have been helpful. And also networking, mentorships, sometimes some mentors can actually, I've seen people who recommended me for opportunities, and maybe I'll find that they don't tell me it's them, but I find that later is somebody whom I've been in touch with, who I do consider a mentor, that put out my name for that opportunity. So I think, no man is an island. It's good to build your network, no matter how. For me, I know that I'll continue to reach out to people, expand my network. I always say that my background as a social media marketer and also as a marketer has helped me know how to build and sustain relationships. So I sort of find myself leveraging on that to be able to, I'm not a pest. I don't reach out to people. I don't disturb people, but I also sort of stay in their consciousness and also make sure that my engagement with them is not very transactional, so they don't feel like I'm just using them for whatever it is they have to offer, whether it's for advice or anything. I'm also very respectful, but I think it's necessary in this, whether it's a photojournalism or art, to know that no man is an island. You need to build a network. I do it a lot online. If I admire an artist, a photographer, I reach out to say, hello, my name is Etinosa, I genuinely admire your work, and, just hail them basically, and that's it. For sustaining projects, I will also say that when you feel like if you take breaks, like this year, I have only worked on my project in March. All of March, I worked on my project. April, May, I did another, because I was preparing for the Biennial. So it was still me working on my project, but not working on the field. But where necessary, you want to take breaks. Taking breaks from your work all allows you to come back to it with a fresh perspective. Because if you're just like on it back to back, first of all, how do you make money? One of the things I do is I have periods where I allow myself to work. I take on commissions, whether it's, I work as a photojournalist. Where opportunities exist, I also do cover events. I know that, for me, I always say there's no shame in hustling. I work as a photojournalist when there are assignments, but there are periods where I want to dedicate myself to my project. And then no matter the money you flash at me, I don't take it. I want to focus on my job. I want to focus on my project. So I always make sure at certain times of the year, I must be at least for a certain number of months in the year, I must dedicate time to work on my project. And after that, I can go and hustle, do assignments, do all of these other things to be able to sustain myself, and then come back to I continue to think of my project and how best to approach it anyway, then come back to it with a fresher perspective if anything new happens. I talked about think about how best to preserve the project. Now, when I exist, is it in book form? Is it in video form? Is it in this? Is it in that? Is it in, for me, I want my projects to be accessible in different mediums. And that's why I am not putting myself in a box. The way that I'm approaching my projects, it's like, if it's going to be in video form, fine. If it's going to be in picture form, fine. It's going to be in book form. If it's going to be in as a VR project or as a 3-dimensional project, I just keep allowing myself to figure out different ways where the project continues to have an afterlife even when I'm not here. So it's important that when you're working on projects, you also think about what is the best approach to preserve this work. What afterlife do you want for your project? It's good to have books, but you don't need to limit yourself to just books. And I would say that maybe one of the things I found, especially when you come from a documentary background, it was one of the struggles I had initially when I started my project, because I knew my work wasn't like the documentary approach. I remember a senior colleague said to me, I like your work, but I don't think it will fit into the editorial world. Fortunately, it had been published in editorial, whether in magazines or whatever. But, excuse me, sorry. All right, sorry. One of the things I was saying is, when you're working on the project, don't limit yourself. If you feel like I started this project as a documentary project, and now I feel like there's a need to add another layer, whether it's video layer or is, whatever it is that comes to you that you feel you can try it out. If it works, then you can continue on it. I think there's sometimes, because of the kind of projects that we see, we sometimes limit ourselves. For me, I allow myself to explore. If I try it out, it doesn't work, that's fine. And then I try something else. But the most important thing is to just figure out different ways in which the projects can be seen, can be received, can be assessed. Yeah, that's it for my talk now, my presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Etinosa. That was really great. I want to, before I have anything, open up for any questions. If people would like to fire off in the chat, we can get some thoughts. But I really liked what I saw as the thread personally for me was a certain fearlessness, whether it was about just starting a project, even if you don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to look, and just following that gut instinct and figuring it out along the way, letting yourself learn along the way. Oh, here's a question we have from Portia about the implications of publishing on your own website. Does this affect the possibility of people wanting to pay for your work?
Sorry, say that again. Okay, what are the implications for publishing on my website? Doesn't this affect people wanting to pay for my work? What I would advise, one of the things I do, for example, I didn't understand it, but I remember, so Daniela Zarkman, she's the founder of Women Photography. I genuinely respect and admire her. I think I'd read in an interview of her, or maybe it was a direct message where she said she doesn't publish all the images from a project. That's, I've forgotten the name of the project. And I didn't understand it. It was years down the line. I now started to understand. So what I do is, For example, if you go on my site and you see it's all in my head, the images that are there are the images that have been there for almost 2 years, and I'm not planning to release new images. That's it. Now, if there's a paid opportunity, for example, for the Berlin Biennial, okay, let me use this more recent example. An art historian who went for the Berlin Biennial saw my project, reached out to me and said they would like to show this work. And they thought that that was the only chapter. And I said, no, I have chapters of this project. So I sent them the entire chapters that I have till date. And then they wrote back to me to say, we didn't know you have this extensive work. We're going to show this chapter and this chapter. But if you go on my site, you would not know the amount of work that I have. So what you want to do is, for example, my project of men, I only have 8 images, and those 8 images are going to be there for years. But as I continue to layer, as the project continues to have new layers, I will not add new stuff. So you might want to add some, like you probably choose 4, 5, 10 images. 10 is a good number. And then as you continue to produce more work, you don't need to add it to your website, so there's not too much of your stuff on the internet. You know, even when editors or people come to you, you might give them the same. You can continue to recycle, especially because the more that I've understood how images are being recycled on the internet, sometimes a platform will publish images, 10 other platforms will republish those images again. So you want to protect your work, especially if you're now starting to show in exhibitions and you want people that come into these exhibitions to not say, oh, I saw this on the internet already. No, you want to give them something new to see so that they stay longer and engage with your work. So you probably choose like just 5, 10 images. That's standard, and for the next 10 years it's there. But as you continue to produce more work, maybe when you have a different approach, you share just one, maybe you start to incorporate video, you can share one video, and if there are 20 other videos you don't share. So when people come into maybe an exhibition space, or an editor reaches out, or somebody, or there's a need for collaboration, they can see that this is an extensive body of work. So you don't need to give out too much, basically.
Yeah.
I've now learned to be selfish with what I give out now.
It's a delicate balance of showing the depth of your work and your talents and not feeling, like you said, that you've given everything away and don't give people reason to publish it or to come and experience it in person.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. No, I appreciate that. It's great to see how you're willing to experiment and how you've used that experimentation to then foster deeper relationships with clients, where you get more control because they trust you and they're looking for your vision. That's a great message, I think, regardless of whether you're a writer or a photographer. I think
I think that as you continue to work, I've gotten a few clients tell me that, oh, we want you to use the approach you use for It's All in My Head for this work. And I'm like, if it doesn't, I mean, I try to let them know I'm not doing this project for the sake of the aesthetics, but right. This is the reason I'm doing this project. So if your project doesn't fit into the context of this particular theme, then unfortunately I cannot do that. But the point is that as you continue to develop yourself and your projects, people will come to you and they want to key into that thing. You know, most of the time when clients reach out to me to say, we want to hire you, sometimes they make reference to, I didn't put all my works here, but they will say, oh, we saw this work that you did. Yeah, I love it so much. I want to hire, I like your work. I would like to work with you. We have a commission here. Oftentimes it's mostly my personal work that brings clients to me, not really my assignment. I mean, maybe they like them, I don't know, but it's mostly, they always reference my personal projects, actually. Always reference my personal projects.
That's a great.
So I really am very invested in working on personal projects.
That's a great endorsement for not just doing it for yourself, but also from a purely business standpoint, that it's a worthwhile investment in yourself to follow your instincts, follow your gut, take chances on yourself. And I could not imagine a better way to say thank you, to wrap this up. We're just at just about at the hour. I don't know if there's any further questions, but we've got a brief survey. If you guys don't mind filling it out. Etinosa, I really appreciate your time and generosity to share with us and leave us all really inspired for the afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're coming from.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Etinosa. Thank you, Scott. for coordinating. Please join me in thanking Etinosa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful to everybody for attending.
Thank
And
you,
I just
David.
wanted to mention.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. And I just want to mention that we do have opportunities if you want to join our community. There are opportunities available to members like pitching stories, like Etinosa was talking about. We do commission work. We also do have internships, fellowships, and we'll be hiring for both a content specialist and an Africa editor. So please look for that in the upcoming weeks and months. So thank you so much for coming, and really look forward to seeing everybody again. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you.
Thanks, everyone.